Have you ever felt the forest watching you? Not just the rustle of leaves, but something else. Something patient, waiting. Welcome to 10 Most Disturbing True Pacific Northwest Wilderness Horror Stories. These terrifying accounts are based on real events, though names and locations have been changed to protect privacy. Each story takes you deep into the darkest corners of the wild, where survival is never guaranteed. Before we step further into the unknown, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Comment below, and if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story from our Dark Fears family. Tonight, you'll hear tales from those who dared to wander into the forests of the Pacific Northwest and live to tell the tale. But remember, the forest doesn't forget those who trespass. I had always considered myself an experienced hiker. The forests of the Pacific Northwest were practically my backyard, and I prided myself on knowing how to navigate the moss-laden trails and slippery streams. But that weekend, my friends and I wanted something different, something unseen on any map, untouched and completely remote. The kind of place where even seasoned hikers hesitate to tread. We arrived late afternoon, the sun already struggling through thick gray clouds. A mist had begun settling among the tall evergreens, curling around the trunks like spectral fingers. The air smelled damp and earthy, with a faint metallic tang that made my stomach churn. Birds chirped nervously, and somewhere, an unseen animal scratched at the underbrush. I felt eyes on me, though no one else seemed to notice. The first odd sign appeared almost immediately. Massive footprints, far too large for any animal in the area, imprinted in the mud beside the trail. They weren't ours. They didn't match shoes either. They veered off into the undergrowth and vanished into shadow. I squatted, tracing the outline with my fingers. The depth and clarity suggested enormous weight. Something had walked here before us, and judging by the direction, it wasn't leaving. I shivered and stood quickly. "It's probably just a bear," I muttered, more to calm myself than anyone else. But the shape of the prints and the unnerving silence that followed told me my mind might be failing me, or the forest had a visitor far stranger than a bear. We pressed on, attempting to rationalize the footprints. But the deeper we went, the stranger the forest became. The fog thickened, rolling in like an alive, suffocating blanket. Every shadow seemed to twist unnaturally. The silence became oppressive, broken only by faint, almost imperceptible whispers. At first, I convinced myself it was the wind rustling through leaves or the distant murmur of a stream. But the whispers were too deliberate, too synchronized with our movements. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, voice cracking. My friends looked at me uneasily, shaking their heads, though I could see their pale faces and tight grips on hiking poles. Shapes flickered in the periphery, dark, humanoid, quick. But when we turned, nothing remained. My heart pounded, each beat amplified in my ears. The forest felt sentient, alive in a way that wasn't natural. Every instinct screamed to leave, yet the mist seemed to coil around us, disorienting and infinite. Then came a sound that made my blood run cold. A soft footstep, deliberate, but not on the trail. The earth was thick with wet leaves. No human could step so silently. And yet, I knew someone, or something, was moving parallel to us, watching, waiting. Hours, or maybe minutes, passed. Time seemed meaningless in the fog-choked forest. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was another hiker, but the figure's posture was wrong. Stiff, unnatural, like a marionette frozen mid-step. It stood just beyond the tree line, shrouded in mist. pulse quickened. The figure had no distinguishable features. Its head tilted slightly, yet I felt its gaze pierce straight through me. The hairless skin, or dark fabric, was impossible to define. It didn't move like a human, yet it didn't run. It just waited. I pointed it out to my friends, whispering urgently. But when they turned, it was gone. Nothing but swirling fog and the low rustle of unseen leaves. My chest tightened. Something was out there, lurking beyond the veil of mist, and it was aware of our every move. The whispers returned, soft, urgent, like 1,000 voices pressing against the back of my skull. I strained to listen, and one word cut through clearly. Leave. My mind raced. Was it human? Animal? Something older, something that didn't belong in this world? I kept moving, flashlight trembling in my hand, trying to convince myself it was a trick of light and fog. But deep down, I knew this wasn't imagination. Something alive was following. We continued, hurrying over twisted roots and slick moss. The forest seemed endless, repeating itself in strange patterns. Every tree looked identical, every shadow a potential threat. The fog thickened, curling around our boots like liquid, and I began to feel the presence of the figure without seeing it. Branches snapped behind us, light, deliberate, too measured to be a falling limb. My friends tried to joke, their voices hollow and unconvincing, as if they were trying to ignore the terror clawing at them. I dared not speak. Every sound felt amplified in the fog, every movement echoing like an invitation. The whispers grew louder, repeating our every word, mimicking our steps. It was no longer a soft warning. It was a taunt. And then the movement, just at the edge of vision, shadows twitching unnaturally. My flashlight flickered, revealing only darkness where the figure should have been. I stumbled over a root, heart hammering. The sensation of eyes on my back was overwhelming, and the fog seemed to pulse, to breathe around us. Something was stalking us, not random, not animal, not human. It was aware, then I saw them. Eyes. Hundreds of amber-colored eyes, glowing faintly from between the trunks. They weren't animal, not exactly. They had an intelligence, a predatory awareness. I froze. My friends panicked, scattering in random directions. One yelled, another stumbled over roots. I tried calling them back, but my voice seemed swallowed by the fog. The eyes followed, unwavering, unblinking. Footsteps echoed behind me, heavy and deliberate. The mist thickened, obscuring the shapes. Yet I could feel the creature moving with impossible speed and precision. My mind raced, rationalizing. A prank? Someone in camo? But instinct screamed otherwise. Then it moved closer. The fog shifted unnaturally, and I caught glimpses. A towering, shadowy figure with elongated limbs gliding silently among the trees. I could feel the air grow colder, my skin prickling, each breath a struggle. Fear became a physical force, pressing in from all sides. The forest was no longer a place of beauty or adventure. It was a trap, and the entity knew it. And then it started. One instant we were frozen, the next, a low rumble underfoot, branches snapping, leaves crunching under weight unseen. Panic surged. We ran blindly, crashing over roots, slipping in mud. The fog seemed alive, wrapping around us, slowing our steps. The shadow followed effortlessly. Every turn, every swerve, it was there, always faster. My lungs burned, heart pounding, each ragged breath swallowed by the mist. I dared not look back, but I could feel it. Heavy, deliberate steps echoing just behind me. Whispers circled us, repeating our panicked screams, mimicking us with uncanny accuracy. Then a brush of cold air on my arm. something tangible, yet impossible to identify. The fog seemed to thicken further, clinging to my skin like icy fingers. In desperation, I dove over a fallen log and burst into a clearing. Moonlight barely cut through the haze. I thought we were safe until I realized it wasn't human, not animal. It was something older, predatory, patient, and infinitely aware. By some miracle, I stumbled upon it. A decrepit cabin, its roof sagging, windows cracked, doors hanging off hinges. Relief washed over me in a wave, though the fog seemed to press closer, almost protective of the forest outside. I slipped inside, heart hammering, listening to the wind howl through broken panes. The cabin smelled of damp wood and rotting leaves. Dust coated everything, and the floorboards groaned under my weight. I pressed my back to a wall, trying to slow my racing heartbeat. For the first time since the forest swallowed us, silence reigned, or so I thought. Then, in the corner of my eye, I saw it. A shadowy silhouette looming just outside the broken window, unmoving. I couldn't make out details, but its presence was undeniable. The amber glow of faint eyes pressed against the pane, watching, waiting. I crouched low, barely daring to breathe. Every instinct screamed to flee. Yet the forest and its creature held me in place. It wasn't just outside, it was everywhere. The fog seemed alive, curling under the door and into the cabin like a living thing. I realized then, the forest hadn't lost interest. It was patient, eternal, and I was merely a trespasser it had chosen to toy with. I survived the night, barely. My friends scattered in different directions, and one never returned. Search parties found no trace of the creature, no footprints, no evidence. Just strangely shaped impressions in the mud, deeper than any human or bear could make. The forest had revealed its true nature. It was alive in ways I couldn't comprehend, watching us, testing us, waiting. Even days later, I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes followed me in daylight, that shadows lingered a fraction too long. Returning once more in broad daylight, the forest seemed innocent, almost welcoming. But I knew better. There was intelligence there, patience, and a malice that hid beneath layers of moss and mist. Whispers still echo in my dreams, carrying words I can barely understand. I avoid hiking alone now. Remote trails, thick fog, unfamiliar paths, they terrify me. And yet, a part of me aches to return, to understand what I glimpsed. But fear keeps me grounded. The Pacific Northwest isn't just wilderness. It's a predator, patient, silent, and infinitely aware. And it remembers. Even weeks later, the presence followed me. In my apartment, in city streets, the whisper of wind, the rustle of leaves, even distant footsteps triggered the memory. The amber eyes, the towering shadow, the inescapable fog, they lingered in my peripheral vision, refusing to let go. Friends brush it off. They weren't there. They can't feel the weight of something ancient, patient, stalking silently behind the veil of reality. The fear is subtle, creeping into quiet moments. A shadow at the corner of my vision, a chill down my spine, a whisper I think I hear when alone. I've stopped venturing into forests entirely. Trails, even familiar ones, seem too exposed, too vulnerable. But I know it waits, somewhere, always. Patience is infinite in the wild. It doesn't forget, doesn't tire. And now, every foggy morning, every shadowed grove, I feel it. Watching, learning, waiting. Some nights, I dream of those amber eyes, glowing, patient, unblinking, staring right through me. And I wake knowing the forest hasn't finished with me. So, if you dare to venture into the Pacific Northwest wilderness, remember this. It's not just trees, rivers, or wildlife. Something else dwells there, ancient and patient. Call it the shadow of the mist, the eyes in the fog, or whatever fits your fear. Respect the forest. Never stray too far. Because even if you survive, it remembers. Every whispered sound, every fleeting shadow, every footstep in the fog, it catalogs them all. And the whispers, they never truly stop. Even now, typing this, I can feel the memory pressing against my mind. I'll never forget. The forest waits for those foolish enough to wander too deep. And the creature? Patient, silent, intelligent, always watching. Dark Fear's family, heed this warning. The forest is alive. It sees, it waits, and it never forgets. I had been hiking the Olympic Peninsula for years and thought I knew every corner of its dense forests. That weekend, I was with two friends, chasing a trail no one seemed to talk about, a hidden path rumored to vanish in the fog and never reappear. It was late September, the air thick with moisture and the smell of decaying leaves. The sky was overcast, gray light filtering unevenly through the canopy. From the start, something felt wrong. The trail was barely a path. Twisted roots, fallen branches, and slick moss made every step a challenge. Birds were absent, their usual chatter replaced by a haunting silence. Even the wind seemed hesitant, brushing against the trees almost apologetically. After an hour, we realized we had no landmarks. The trail was unrecognizable, and then we saw them. Footprints, deep and irregular, scattered off the path, disappearing into a dark tangle of ferns. Too large to be human, too deliberate to be random. I tried to shrug it off. Probably just a hunter, I muttered. But the silence pressed on me, the way the fog clung to every branch, every stone. Something was here, watching, waiting. I felt it in my bones, a heavy, patient awareness that followed our steps, unrelenting. The fog thickened as we pushed forward. Visibility dropped to barely 10 feet. Shadows twisted and stretched in unnatural ways, and every snapped twig echoed like a gunshot in the oppressive silence. Something was moving just beyond our vision. Silent, deliberate, too heavy for a deer, too fluid for a person. Then came the sound, a low, guttural hum. It wasn't music, it wasn't a growl, just a vibration in the air that seemed to press into my chest. My friends froze. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. They nodded, eyes wide, but none spoke. Our footsteps felt deafening, and I could swear the hum reacted to our movement. Shapes flitted in the corners of my vision, tall, elongated, hunched figures disappearing into the fog before I could focus. I tried to rationalize. Maybe hunters, pranksters, an overactive imagination. But the instinct in my gut told me it wasn't human. Every so often, the hum would morph into a whisper, barely audible, repeating our names, mocking our fear. The fog felt alive, curling around us, teasing our vision, trapping us in a maze of white-gray silence. And then, movement closer. Too deliberate, almost stalking us step for step. Hours, or maybe it was only minutes, passed in a haze of mist and unease. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was another hiker, but the figure didn't walk. It glided. Its movements were smooth, unnatural, almost fluid, like the fog itself had taken form. I froze. It was tall, far taller than a man should be, with elongated limbs and a head that tilted in impossible angles. No face was visible, only a dark, featureless shadow. But I felt it watching me. The air grew colder, heavier, as if it was pressing against my chest. My friends didn't see it at first. I pointed, voice barely a whisper. "There. Do you see that?" When they turned, it vanished into the fog, as if it had never existed. leaving nothing but swirling mist and the echo of its presence. Then came the whispers. Low, guttural, almost melodic in a way that made my stomach churn. "Leave. Leave," it murmured, carried by the wind, yet undeniably directed at us. I wanted to run, but my legs trembled, paralyzed with terror. I knew then it wasn't human. It was something ancient, patient, and infinitely aware. And it had chosen us. Panic ignited. One moment we were standing, the next, instinct took over. Branches snapped underfoot, roots tripped us, but the figure was faster. Its presence pressed against us, tangible in the cold air, brushing against skin like an invisible force. The fog thickened around us, swallowing familiar landmarks. Every direction looked identical, twisted by shadow and mist. My flashlight flickered, revealing glimpses of elongated limbs moving between trees, but never enough to focus on. The whispers grew louder, repeating our cries, our panicked commands, mocking our fear. My friends screamed, scattering in random directions. I tried to call them back, but my voice was swallowed by the fog, and it felt like the figure anticipated every move. Branches snapped sharply behind me. No human could step so deliberately, so silently. The forest had become a labyrinth of terror. Every instinct told me to flee, but the fog resisted, curling around my boots, dragging me backward. I realized we weren't just being followed, we were being hunted. Every step, every breath, every heartbeat it cataloged, waiting for the perfect moment. And I was terrified to find out what would come next. And then I saw them. Hundreds of small, glowing amber eyes, peering through the fog from between the trunks. They weren't animal. They weren't human. They were aware, predatory, watching every move we made. I froze, heart pounding. My friends were scattered, some stumbling, some screaming into the mist. The footsteps behind me continued, heavy, deliberate, impossible to place. I called their names, but my voice seemed swallowed by the oppressive fog. The tall shadow glided closer, limbs unnaturally long, flowing through the mist as if it was part of the fog itself. I could feel its presence pressing against me, a weight in the air, a cold so deep it burned. Every instinct screamed, "Run!" Yet every direction seemed endless. The forest had become a predator, and we were its prey. The whispers morphed into commands, urging us into panic, driving us further into confusion and exhaustion. And in that moment, I realized we were utterly lost and utterly visible to something that did not belong to this world. We ran blindly, the fog thickening with every step, turning familiar trails into an endless maze. My lungs burned, legs ached, and my heart thundered so loudly I thought it might give away my position. Every branch that snapped behind me made me flinch. The shadow was always there, silently gliding, never slowing, almost savoring the chase. The whispers followed, repeating our screams and frantic footsteps, twisting them into a cruel mockery. I stumbled over a mossy root, sliding into wet leaves, and felt something brush past me. Warm, solid, impossibly heavy. Yet when I scrambled to my feet, nothing was there. The fog was alive, curling around me like a living thing, guiding us into a trap. We reached a clearing where moonlight struggled through thick clouds. For a brief moment, I thought we could escape. But the eyes appeared, glowing amber and unblinking, surrounding the edges of the clearing. The shadow stood at the far edge, motionless, tall, and silent, watching as if amused by our desperation. I realized running might not save us. Survival meant strategy. Keep moving. Don't stumble. Don't look back. And most importantly, don't stop. I stumbled upon it by accident. a small abandoned hunting cabin hidden behind dense evergreens. The door hung crooked, and broken windows revealed nothing but shadows. Relief hit me like a wave, though fear still clawed at my chest. Inside, the air smelled of damp wood and decay. Dust coated every surface, and the floor groaned under my trembling weight. I pressed myself against the wall, ears straining for any sound outside. For a moment, the forest seemed paused, almost respectful of the cabin's fragile sanctuary. But then I saw it, just at the edge of a broken window. The figure, impossibly tall, featureless, standing in the fog outside. The amber eyes glowed faintly, unblinking, waiting. My chest tightened as I realized the cabin wasn't protection. It was a vantage point, and the forest and its predator had trapped me here temporarily. I stayed crouched until the fog began to lift slightly, every shadow outside shifting unnaturally. I understood then that survival was possible, but only if I respected the patience and intelligence of whatever had been stalking us. Dawn broke weakly through the fog. I waited, motionless, until the forest seemed momentarily dormant. Heart still pounding, I crept out the back of the cabin, choosing the shallowest fog patches. Every step felt deliberate, measured, as if the figure could sense hesitation. I saw footprints leading away. Some ours, some deep, irregular, too large to be human. Following them cautiously, I retraced a route that seemed vaguely familiar, praying the forest would allow it. Branches snapped behind me, faint but deliberate, yet the figure didn't pursue aggressively. For now, it was patient, letting fear do its work. Hours later, I stumbled onto a marked trail, signs of other hikers finally returning me to safety. I dared not look back, though I felt eyes on me until the forest was just a distant line of green. My friends were scattered. One never returned. Search teams found no trace of the figure, only strangely shaped impressions in mud and deep leaf litter. I realized the forest wasn't just a wilderness. It was a predator, patient, intelligent, and infinitely aware. Weeks passed, but the memory didn't fade. The forest followed me, not physically, but in every rustle, every whisper of wind. Footsteps in the distance, shadows at the corner of my vision, the faint scent of wet moss in strange places. All reminders that whatever I had encountered was patient and still aware of me. I avoided forests, even familiar ones. Simple trails felt unsafe. The amber eyes, the towering figure, and the whispering fog haunted my thoughts. Friends dismissed it as paranoia. They weren't there, they hadn't seen it. But the fear is real. It never left. Even in my apartment at night, I hear whispers carried on the wind, soft but insistent. Leave. Come back. And I know deep down, it waits. Patiently, watching, cataloging, waiting for the next time someone wanders too far. The Pacific Northwest is not merely wilderness. It is alive, ancient, and patient. And whatever haunts it never forgets. If you dare venture into the forests of the Pacific Northwest, heed this warning. It's not just trees, rivers, or wildlife. Something else lurks there, ancient, patient, and aware. Call it the eyes in the fog, the shadow of the mist, or whatever fits your fear. Do not wander alone. Avoid unfamiliar trails. Respect the forest's patience. Even if you survive, the memory will haunt you. You'll feel eyes on your back in the sunlight, shadows stretching unnaturally, whispers in the wind. I survived. Barely. But I know the forest remembers me, and it will remember you too if you venture too far. Patience is eternal here. Silence is never safe. And the shadow always waits. Dark Fears family, let this be your cautionary tale. The Pacific Northwest wilderness is alive, watching, and never forgiving. I had always loved the quiet isolation of the Pacific Northwest, but that weekend pushed me further than I had ever been. My goal was a small, remote cabin deep in the Olympic Mountains, a place so far off the grid that GPS didn't work and phone signals vanished. I craved solitude, but what awaited me was something far beyond loneliness. The hike was deceptively calm. Mist curled around towering evergreens, dripping into moss-covered ground. Birds were silent. The wind whispered faintly, almost as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Every step squished in wet leaves, every branch groaned under unseen weight. The farther I went, the more the world seemed to shrink, the trail narrowing into a tunnel of shadows and fog. I arrived at the cabin as the sun dipped below the peaks. Its walls were weathered, paint peeling, windows dark and uninviting. Inside smelled of damp wood and rot. Dust covered everything. I felt uneasy but brushed it off. Maybe the isolation was playing tricks on my mind. Then I noticed footprints in the soft earth outside. Large, irregular, too deep for a human or bear. They led into the trees and vanished. My heart thumped in my chest. The forest wasn't empty. Something was here, and I wasn't supposed to be alone. Night fell quickly. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the cabin walls. I tried to settle in, unpacking my gear, but the forest beyond felt alive, pressing in, every branch and leaf moving with purpose. Then I heard it. Whispers, soft, unintelligible at first, carried on the wind. I froze. The voices were deliberate, rhythmic, following the contour of the cabin. My rational mind argued it was the wind, echoes of my own footsteps, imagination, but instinct screamed otherwise. Every hair on my neck bristled. Something, or someone, was outside, moving in the fog. Then came movement, branches swaying without wind, shadows flickering between trees, too quick and precise to be natural. I grabbed my flashlight, sweeping it across the dense forest. Nothing. Yet I felt it. Eyes, always eyes, tracking my every motion. The whispers grew louder, repeating my name, mocking my fear. The fog seemed to coil around the cabin, pressing against the walls as if it wanted in. I realized then that the forest had noticed me, cataloged me, and was deciding how much to reveal. Or perhaps how far to let me survive. Hours passed in oppressive silence. That's when I saw them, eyes. Hundreds of small, amber-colored eyes glowing faintly through the thick mist between the trees. They weren't animal, not human, yet intelligent, observing, calculating. I froze. My heartbeat thundered in my chest. Shadows moved unnaturally in the fog, and I could feel a presence pressing against my back, unseen yet undeniable. The whispers returned, clear this time. My name, repeated in tones that sounded both familiar and alien. Then I saw it. A tall, featureless humanoid, limbs elongated unnaturally, gliding between trees without sound. Its head tilted at impossible angles. The mist seemed to cling to it, part of its form. I wanted to run, but my legs refused. My mind argued with instinct, but instinct always won. Every instinct screamed, "Do not stay." I grabbed my flashlight and shone it in its direction. The beam revealed only shifting fog and glimpses of limbs that vanished the instant I focused. My rational mind tried to explain it away. Pranksters, hallucination. But the pressure in the air, the cold, and the calculated movements told me otherwise. I was not alone. And I wasn't just being watched. I was being hunted. I bolted from the cabin, stumbling over roots and slick moss. The fog swallowed everything familiar, and every shadow seemed to move independently, twisting unnaturally. The figure glided behind me, silent, deliberate. A predator, not in a hurry but fully aware. Branches snapped under my frantic steps, and the whispering grew louder, repeating my every word, mocking my panic. The mist seemed alive, curling around my ankles and rising like fingers, disorienting me. I called out to the forest, to my rational mind, to anyone who could hear me. But only the echoes answered. My flashlight flickered, revealing the tall shadow for a split second, limbs impossibly long, head tilting unnaturally. Then nothing. But the weight in the air, the presence, remained. I tried to navigate toward a known trail, but the fog played tricks. Familiar trees appeared in unfamiliar arrangements, trunks multiplying, paths looping back on themselves. My heart raced. I realized survival wasn't just about speed. It was about understanding the forest itself, respecting its patience, and not drawing attention. Every step was measured. Every breath was calculated. Every heartbeat echoed too loudly in the mist. And behind me, it moved with silent purpose, always aware. I slipped into a small clearing, gasping for breath. The moonlight barely penetrated the fog, but that was enough. Amber eyes surrounded the edges, dozens of them, unblinking, intelligent and predatory. Then the tall figure stepped into the moonlight, impossibly still, its elongated limbs stretching beyond natural proportions. I felt a tangible pressure in the air, a weight that pushed against my chest and forced me to my knees. Its gaze, or whatever passed for eyes, was unrelenting. The whispers became commands. Leave, leave, stay, come. I couldn't make sense of them, yet they penetrated my mind, threatening to break my focus, my sanity. I stumbled backward, tripping over roots, scraping my hands and knees. I realized I was trapped between the eyes in the fog and the figure advancing silently. Every instinct screamed run, but my body refused to move efficiently. The forest had turned into a labyrinth of terror, every step anticipated, every move catalogued. The figure tilted its head in a way that felt mocking. I understood then. It wasn't hunting out of hunger. It was playing, testing, observing. And I was the unwitting participant in its patience game. I ran blindly, guided only by the dim moonlight cutting through the fog. The forest seemed alive, twisting, folding over itself, disorienting me. Branches clawed at my face and clothes, roots tried to trip me, but I didn't dare stop. Behind me, the figure moved with unnatural grace, silent, deliberate, always closing the distance. The amber eyes multiplied as I passed through the dense trees surrounding me, reflecting in the wet leaves like some grotesque constellation. The whispers echoed my frantic heartbeat, shaping it into commands I could barely resist. Faster, leave, run. I tripped, falling into a tangle of moss and branches. My flashlight rolled away, flickering briefly, revealing the tall shadow only a few feet away. Its head tilted, limbs bending in impossible angles, and I could feel the air ripple from its presence. The forest had closed in, but instinct carried me forward. I scrambled to my feet, lunging through the fog, the whispers chasing me like a storm. Every nerve screamed terror. Yet somewhere inside, a tiny part of me marveled at the intelligence, the patience, the almost deliberate cruelty of the hunt. I realized then that survival wasn't guaranteed. It was earned, and I wasn't sure if I would. By sheer luck, I stumbled across a small hunting shack tucked among towering firs. Its door was ajar, a rusted padlock swinging in the breeze. Relief and terror clashed inside me. The fog seemed to hesitate at the edge of the clearing, as if respecting the fragile sanctuary. Inside, The air was damp, musty with decay, dust coating every surface. I pressed myself against a wall, trying to quiet my racing heartbeat. Outside, faint movement caught my eye. The figure lingered in the fog, featureless, towering, unblinking. Amber eyes pierced the gray, scanning, patient. I stayed still, barely daring to breathe. Branches scraped the roof. Leaves rustled unnaturally. Every second was a countdown. Then, gradually, the fog began to recede, curling back into the forest. The whispers faded. For now. I realized survival was temporary. The forest was patient, the creature deliberate. This sanctuary wasn't protection. It was a pause in a game that had only just begun. At first light, I crept from the shack. Fog lingered, but visibility had improved enough to navigate. Every step was deliberate, calculated to avoid drawing attention. The amber eyes lingered in the trees, but the figure did not pursue. Patience, I realized, was its weapon. I followed faint traces of a familiar trail, moving slowly, mind hyper-aware of every sound. Footfalls echoed too sharply, shadows shifted unnaturally, and I could almost feel the creature cataloging each movement, waiting for a mistake. Hours later, I reached a marked trail, signs of hikers returning me to civilization. Relief was immense, yet incomplete. One of my friends had disappeared completely, never to be found. Search teams found no trace of the figure, only distorted footprints in mud and leaves. Even with safety regained, I knew the forest wasn't just a place. It was alive, intelligent, and patient. And whatever had followed me that night would not forget. Weeks passed, but I could not shake it. Every rustle of leaves, every distant footstep, even the creak of my floorboards at night reminded me of those amber eyes. Shadows at the corners of my vision, whispers carried on the wind. They never truly disappeared. Friends dismissed it as paranoia. They weren't there. They didn't see it. But I did. I can still feel the patience of the forest, the weight of something ancient observing from the mist, cataloging every move. I avoid forests entirely now. Trails, even familiar ones, terrify me. Every foggy morning, every shadowed grove, I feel it watching. And I know deep down, it will never forget me. The Pacific Northwest wilderness is alive. It sees, it waits, and it remembers. So here is the warning. The Pacific Northwest is not just wilderness. There is something ancient, patient, and aware lurking in the fog, among the towering evergreens. Call it the shadow of the mist, the eyes in the fog. Names don't matter. Do not wander alone. Avoid unfamiliar trails. Respect the forest's patience. Even if you survive, the memory will haunt you. Shadows stretch unnaturally. Whispers echo in the wind. Amber eyes follow. I survived. But the forest remembers. It catalogs, it waits, it learns. And someday, if you wander too far, it will notice you too. Dark fears, family. Take this caution seriously. The wilderness is alive, and patience is eternal. You may walk among it, but it always watches, always waits, always remembers. In early March of 2016, 34-year-old Evan Laird, a Seattle-based freelance photographer, set out on what he described as a solo retreat into the wild. His destination was the Hoh Rainforest, deep within Washington's Olympic National Park. Known for its emerald canopy, constant drizzle, and eerie quiet, it's one of the most untouched ecosystems in North America. Evan was a skilled hiker who often combined photography with wilderness travel. His Instagram page was filled with tranquil shots of moss-covered trees and silver fog curling around the riverbanks. Before leaving, he told his sister Megan that he planned to spend 3 nights deep in the interior. past where the trails end. On March 9th, he checked in at the visitor center, signed the wilderness log, and parked his silver Subaru near the Hall of Moss's trailhead. Witnesses saw him hike off alone with a green backpack and a collapsible tripod strapped to his side. The next several days brought relentless rain and wind. When March 12th came and went with no sign of Evan, park rangers were notified. What began as a simple welfare check would soon spiral into one of the most chilling missing persons cases in Pacific Northwest history. By dawn on March 13th, a coordinated search began. Evan's car was still at the trailhead, coated with pine needles and moisture, suggesting it hadn't been moved in days. Inside were 2 empty water bottles, a folded park map, and a receipt time-stamped from Forks, Washington, the morning he left. The first search crew, led by Ranger Tom Hendricks, located Evan's campsite 2 miles beyond the main loop trail. The tent had collapsed under rainwater, a campfire lay drowned in mud, and his tripod stood upright, pointing into dense fog. But there was one crucial absence: the camera itself. Nearby, a single set of boot prints led north, away from camp, then abruptly stopped mid-trail. No return tracks, no slide marks or scuffing. It was as if he had stepped forward and vanished. Hendricks later described the site as eerily quiet, not even insects. Dogs brought in to track Evan's scent circled aimlessly, whining and refusing to move beyond a certain distance. By the 3rd day, the weather worsened, and radio signals began dropping out without reason. The Hoh rainforest had turned into an impenetrable maze of mist and static. 3 days into the search, a volunteer named Daniel Kirsch discovered a small black object lodged deep inside a tree hollow roughly a mile from the camp. It was Evan's DSLR camera. Half submerged in mud, its strap tangled in the bark. The lens was cracked, but the SD card miraculously survived. Back at the ranger station, investigators reviewed the images. The first 100 photos were what you'd expect from a nature photographer. Stunning shots of moss-covered trunks, close-ups of dewdrops, and low-light river exposures. But the final 3 images disturbed everyone in the room. The first showed the same forest path, but a blurred human-like figure stood halfway between 2 cedar trees, partly obscured by fog. The next was angled sharply upward, suggesting the camera had fallen mid-capture. The final image was completely black, until forensic analysis revealed faint outlines of a pale, elongated hand pressed against the lens. Experts couldn't explain the lighting or the motion blur. There were no other footprints in the area, and no other campers reported missing. The file timestamps showed those photos were taken minutes before Evan's last recorded night. Ranger Hendricks and his team returned to the site with canine units and thermal scanners. Something about the area felt off. Radios emitted static bursts whenever they crossed a certain ravine, and searchers reported hearing faint knocks echoing in rhythmic patterns. 3 beats, pause, then 3 again. At one point, a rescuer shouted Evan's name, and a faint echo repeated his words back seconds later, in the same tone. Sound tests conducted later showed no natural acoustics could cause such precise mimicry. One night, as Hendricks recorded his field log, he caught what sounded like whispering voices layered under rainfall. The transcript noted, "It's like the forest is breathing, and it knows we're here." When dogs were brought closer to the camera site, they froze and began growling at empty space. Their handlers later withdrew them, citing unusual agitation. Within 5 days, the search had expanded into one of the largest single park operations in Washington's history. Still, not one personal item, footprint, or trace of struggle surfaced beyond that camera. In June, nearly 3 months after the official search was suspended, a local hiker stumbled across a small digital recorder embedded in moss beside a fallen log, less than a mile from where Evan disappeared. The serial number confirmed it was his. The audio file contained over an hour of forest ambiance. Dripping rain, distant thunder, occasional footsteps. But near the end, everything changed. The recorder captured heavy breathing, the rustle of running, and a low, droning hum like an engine idling far away. Then Evan's voice whispered, "It's still following. I can hear it between the trees." Seconds later came another sound, like knocking on wood, deliberate and slow. Acoustic specialists later determined the hum did not match any known wildlife or equipment frequencies. No helicopters, no logging machinery. Rangers insisted there were no active operations in that sector. The final 10 seconds were silent, except for shallow breaths. Then a single sharp snap, and the recording cut off. What caused it remains unknown. The device's internal clock had stopped exactly at 3:12 a.m. When the case reached public media, speculation flooded online forums. Some believed Evan fell victim to disorientation or hypothermia. Others pointed to infrasound, low-frequency vibrations known to cause fear, nausea, and hallucinations in dense forests. But among local Kino tribes, the story struck an older nerve. According to oral history, certain valleys in the Hu are inhabited by those who listen, entities that imitate voices to draw people deeper. These spirits, said to dwell in still air and silence, were once warnings not to wander too far from firelight. Ranger Hendricks refused to discuss the folklore publicly, but colleagues recall him saying, "You can feel when the forest doesn't want you there." In July, the Park Service closed a large section of the Ho interior, citing unstable terrain and environmental hazards. No official mention of Evan appeared in the closure memo. But satellite data later showed thermal anomalies, short bursts of heat, near his last known location, recorded weeks after he vanished. Nearly a year later, a group of kayakers discovered a waterproof notebook trapped between stones along the Ho riverbank, 15 miles downstream. It was identified as Evan's field journal. Most entries were mundane observations about light patterns and exposure settings. But the final pages revealed a descent into fear. His handwriting deteriorated, sentences fragmented. "The woods move when I'm not looking. Something walks behind me, but never shows. The rain hides its steps." One page contained a crude sketch, two tall shapes standing among trees, featureless, facing him. On the last page, written in smeared graphite, were 6 words. "It knows my name when I sleep." The notebook was turned over to authorities, but never released publicly. A source within the Park Service claimed that investigators found unexplained residue, a fine gray powder clinging to the cover that tested negative for soil, ash, or pollen. In 2018, an independent search group used thermal drones and motion sensors to revisit the restricted zone. On the second night, the drone's infrared picked up a human-sized heat signature moving slowly through the trees. The object paused, then vanished mid-frame. Moments later, one of the team members reported a chill sweeping through the forest, a drop of 15 degrees Fahrenheit in under a minute. Their audio picked up faint tapping, the same triple knock pattern described years earlier. They pursued the coordinates and found nothing but fog. Yet one drone operator claimed to see a figure crouching beside a cedar trunk, staring back. When the footage was reviewed, that moment appeared only as static. The drone's battery drained instantly after the incident, a failure rate never before recorded. No one in the group returned for a second expedition. The recovered footage was quietly handed to the National Park Service, who classified it internally. It has never been seen by the public. By 2019, the case of Evan Laird was officially closed as unsolved, presumed deceased. His family received a minimal report noting environmental exposure as the probable cause of death, though no remains or belongings were ever found. Unofficially, rangers still avoid the northern stretch of the Hoh interior. Hendricks, now retired, admitted in a later interview, "We didn't find a body because there wasn't one to find." Visitors occasionally report hearing camera shutters clicking deep in the forest at night, despite being alone. Others claim their electronic devices malfunction when they approach certain clearings. In 2021, hikers discovered another tripod half buried in moss near the same location. It wasn't Evan's model, and no missing person reports matched it. The forest continues to reclaim everything left behind. As Hendricks once said, "Whatever took him, it belongs here." Today, the Hoh rainforest remains both breathtaking and unnerving, a place where the line between beauty and dread blurs. Evan's disappearance became one of more than 40 unsolved cases in the Pacific Northwest involving hikers who simply vanished without evidence of injury, wildlife, or foul play. To some, it's coincidence, a wilderness vast enough to erase anyone. To others, it's proof that something in these forests listens, watches, and waits. Megan, Evan's sister, still visits the trailhead every March. She leaves a small camera charm tied to a branch near the visitor sign. Locals say on quiet mornings, if the fog is just right, you can hear a single click echo faintly from the trees, like a shutter closing on something you'll never see again. And deep within the forest, under a canopy older than memory, the silence remains heavy, patient, and listening. In the summer of 2019, Mount Rainier National Park, a place of breathtaking beauty and silent peril, became the stage for one of the strangest incidents in the Pacific Northwest's modern history. On June 28th, two seasonal rangers, Laura Chen and Mark Ellison, were stationed near Sunrise Camp, 6,400 feet above sea level. Their job was routine: monitor weather, guide hikers, and document atmospheric conditions for the park's environmental records. That night, Rainier's upper slopes were wrapped in clouds. Winds were calm, temperatures dropped below freezing, and visibility was poor. But around 10:43 p.m., a series of bright, pulsing lights appeared over the ridge. Silent, white at first, then amber, moving against the wind. Both rangers logged the sighting in the meteorological record and tried to photograph it. But the camera malfunctioned. A static band distorted each frame. Moments later, their radios cut out. The lights hovered for nearly 3 minutes before vanishing upward into the mist, leaving behind a deep vibration that rattled the camp's metal gear. That would have been strange enough. But what came after, and the discovery the next morning, turned this routine posting into one of the most disturbing unsolved cases in the park's archives. The following morning, reports came in from a nearby climbing team, led by Dr. Anthony Brackett, a geology professor from Oregon State University. One of their members, Jason Reeve, 29, had gone missing overnight from their base camp, about a mile from where the lights were seen. Jason was described as level-headed and experienced. His tent zipper was open, sleeping bag undisturbed. His boots and headlamp were gone, but his climbing harness remained. His GPS tracker had stopped transmitting at 10:47 p.m., the same minute the lights were logged by the rangers. Searchers found partial footprints leading uphill into loose scree and ice crust, stopping abruptly near a shallow depression in the snow. The depression was warm to the touch, melting outward as if something heated the ground from below. The rescue crew took thermal scans but found nothing. When night fell, several team members reported hearing metallic humming echoing through the canyons, low, continuous, and directionless. Jason was never located that day. What they would find the following morning, however, defied explanation. A discovery that made even the most seasoned park investigators question what they'd been taught to dismiss as myth. On June 30th, the second day of search, a helicopter spotted an unusual circular patch of scorched rock near the upper Emmons Glacier. It measured nearly 20 feet across and appeared blackened, as if burned. Yet the surrounding snow showed no signs of ignition. When investigators hiked to the site, they found Jason Reeves' climbing helmet placed perfectly at the circle's center. The plastic was softened, almost warped, but not melted. There were no footprints leading in or out. Only faint electromagnetic interference that disrupted nearby radios and cameras. Samples of soil and rock were collected and sent to the University of Washington for testing. Results later showed traces of magnetite and fused silicates, substances typically formed only at extremely high temperatures. The National Park Service classified the finding as unknown geological anomaly, but several rangers privately noted something stranger. When they stood near the circle, their watches all lost time, 3 to 5 minutes difference across devices. Henderson, the field supervisor, ordered all personnel to vacate the ridge by sunset. That night, the lights returned, brighter and closer. At 10:39 p.m., both ranger camps reported visual contact. Multiple glowing spheres hovered in a triangular pattern over the eastern slope. They emitted no sound, only an electrical pulse that vibrated through the air. Witnesses described the color as pale gold, shifting to red as they moved. Laura Chen, recording audio notes at the time, stated, "They're moving against the wind. It's as if they're scanning the ground." Moments later, a sharp tone pierced through every handheld radio, followed by silence. One of the portable cameras began capturing interference static, showing a faint humanoid silhouette near the edge of the light beams. The object suddenly ascended straight up, disappearing into thick cloud cover. Then, within seconds, a thunderous shockwave rolled across the valley, flattening tents and triggering minor rock slides. When daylight came, several metallic fragments were found embedded in snowdrifts, small, triangular, unnaturally smooth. The Park Service quietly confiscated them, labeling them meteorite remnants. But no meteor activity was reported that night. By morning, every compass within 5 miles of Sunrise Camp had shifted magnetic north by 6 degrees. 2 weeks later, an anonymous envelope arrived at the National Park Service headquarters in Ashford. Inside was a handwritten note signed only L.C., presumed to be Ranger Laura Chen. The letter claimed that the park's internal report had been falsified. She wrote that on the second night after the lights disappeared, they discovered Jason Reeves' glove partially buried near the burned circle. Inside was a torn scrap of paper, words smeared but readable. "They're above the ridge." Not human Laura's note continued. "We were told to mark it as an avalanche accident. They took the evidence. They said it's classified under aerospace. But there were no aircraft, no debris, only the hum that never stopped." Her identity was never confirmed. Laura resigned from the park within a month and was never located for comment. The Park Service denied receiving such correspondence. Yet years later, a whistleblower within the department confirmed a sealed file on Mount Rainier, June 2019. Phenomenon lights existed, restricted under federal code, Air traffic control records from Joint Base Lewis McChord, roughly 60 miles southwest of Rainier, revealed something unusual that same night. At 10:41 p.m., radar picked up 3 unidentified returns above the park's airspace, moving at irregular speeds and vanishing instantly from the screen. Controllers assumed it was interference caused by the mountain's magnetism. But an internal memo leaked months later told a different story. Objects demonstrated vertical acceleration inconsistent with any known aircraft. Civilian radar corroborated the data. One private pilot flying over Puget Sound reported amber strobe lights weaving like fireflies in the upper atmosphere. The Federal Aviation Administration classified the reports as unconfirmed aerial anomalies. Yet local residents of Enumclaw and Ashford called 911 that night, reporting strange electrical outages and a vibration under the ground. It was as if the mountain itself had pulsed with energy, only to return to perfect calm by morning. The air base later denied all radar involvement. By mid-July, Mount Rainier's northeast trails were abruptly closed to the public. Officially, it was due to rock instability. But climbers who approached from other routes reported drones patrolling at night, unmarked, silent, hovering low over the snowfields. Several independent researchers attempted to revisit the burned ridge, but were turned back by federal officers claiming it was restricted under geological preservation law. No such law exists in that sector. Satellite imagery later revealed something odd. A perfectly circular clearing, 20 meters across, where snow refused to accumulate for nearly 6 months. It remained dark even under fresh snowfall. Environmental sensors nearby began registering electromagnetic surges once every 24 hours, always at 10:43 p.m., the same minute the first lights appeared weeks earlier. The park stopped releasing those environmental readings after August 2019. In late 2020, a freelance journalist named David Keene tracked down Mark Ellison, the surviving ranger from that night. Filmed in his Tacoma apartment, the footage was never publicly aired, but transcripts surfaced online months later. When asked what he saw, Ellison paused for nearly a minute before replying, "They weren't lights, they were eyes." He described the shapes not as machines, but as living spheres, transparent, shifting, as if made of liquid fire. He said the humming wasn't mechanical, but felt like being inside someone else's heartbeat. When questioned about Jason Reeve, Ellison simply said, "He walked toward them." Like he heard something we couldn't. After the interview, Keene reported that Ellison appeared paranoid, insisting he was being followed. 2 weeks later, he was found deceased in his car from carbon monoxide poisoning. Authorities ruled it suicide. No foul play was recorded. In early 2021, the Rainier case files were officially sealed under Department of Interior emergency classification, citing aviation and defense confidentiality. All physical evidence, including the burned rock samples and recovered fragments, was transferred to an undisclosed facility. Local park staff were instructed not to discuss June 2019 events. The official story became a small thermal explosion due to underground gas. But internal logs leaked later that year showed at least 9 personnel reported recurring nightmares about flickering amber lights above their tents. Electronics stored near the sample containers continued to malfunction. Independent geologists who later visited the same ridge found faint radiation spikes and microwave damage patterns on nearby stones, consistent with exposure to high-intensity electromagnetic fields. Whatever happened that night, it wasn't geological, and it wasn't weather. Today, Mount Rainier still stands majestic and silent, a towering giant that guards its secrets beneath miles of ice. Officially, Jason Reeve remains one of over 300 missing individuals never recovered within Washington's wilderness. Unofficially, rangers whisper that on certain nights, faint amber glows still appear above the eastern ridges, always around 10:43 p.m. Locals call it the Rainier Pulse. Pilots avoid flying over it after dark. No one has successfully explained the heat circle, the shifted magnetic readings, or the untraceable fragments. The case remains filed under unresolved atmospheric phenomenon. But those who've seen the raw footage describe something else entirely. Not technology, not storm light, but something aware, scanning the earth as if searching for someone or something. It lost long ago, and when the fog closes over Mount Rainier's ridges and the hum begins again, the park goes quiet. Radios flicker, compasses drift, and for a few haunting moments each summer night, the mountain watches back. In early September of 2019, Matthew Cole, a 41-year-old park maintenance contractor, was assigned to inspect the old Rim Trail on the north side of Crater Lake National Park, Oregon. This section of trail had been closed for years due to erosion and repeated bear sightings, but Matthew was known for his quiet confidence and years of fieldwork experience. He'd been with the Park Service for nearly 2 decades, described by his colleagues as calm, methodical, and level-headed. "The last guy to spook easy," one ranger said. The morning of September 7th was clear but unusually still. According to weather records, wind speeds were near zero, and the lake's surface looked like glass. Unnaturally calm for that season. Matthew parked his truck at the north access gate at 9:13 a.m., logged his route with dispatch, and began his solitary hike along the abandoned path. He never returned. By nightfall, his radio remained silent. The check-in calls went unanswered. Rangers dispatched a small team to locate him before dark, but they found only his clipboard lying neatly on the path. The final note reading, "Trail silent. No wind. Feels off." When Matthew failed to return by dawn the next day, a formal search operation began. The team of 6 rangers and 2 K9 units swept the North Rim, following the path he was known to take. At first, everything appeared normal, until they noticed the forest's unnatural silence. Birds, insects, even the distant echo of wind across the lake were absent. The handlers reported that both dogs refused to continue past a particular section marked by an old wooden sign, long faded and unreadable. At 11:42 a.m., the team found Matthew's backpack, perfectly upright beside the trail, straps buckled, water bottle half full. No tracks surrounded it. His GPS unit, still functional, showed he had stopped moving at 10:06 a.m., roughly 3.2 miles from the starting point. The coordinates ended there. Ranger Lisa Pennington, part of the lead search team, later said, "I've done dozens of searches, and I've never seen anything like it. It's like the air was thick, like sound didn't want to travel." By the 3rd day, the operation had expanded to nearly 50 people. Yet not a single new clue appeared. No footprints, no torn fabric, just stillness. On the 4th day, a volunteer drone operator scanning the north slope spotted something reflective near a ridge. The coordinates led rescuers to a small clearing overlooking the lake, where they found a folded piece of aluminum sheet, possibly from old park equipment. But underneath it, buried under moss, they discovered something else. A torn sleeve from a Park Service uniform. DNA confirmed it belonged to Matthew. The sleeve had been ripped cleanly, not frayed, not torn by force, almost as if cut by heat. Forensics noted that the edges showed minor thermal damage, though no fire was reported anywhere near the area. Nearby, embedded in the soil, was Matthew's radio earpiece, melted and warped. Investigators assumed it was due to a lightning strike, but weather logs again showed no electrical activity that day or the week before. The search was scaled back by the 8th day. Officials cited environmental hazards and limited visibility as reasons for halting. But off-record, several rescuers reported the same recurring phrase in their field logs. "The woods are humming." 2 weeks later, the Park Service released portions of Matthew's radio transmissions for review. The first few were routine check-ins, clear voice, standard trail updates. Then, at 10:05 a.m., his tone shifted. "This section's clear, but I don't know. It's too quiet. I can hear my heartbeat." Pause. Static. Wait. Something's... Transmission cuts out. A final burst came through 7 minutes later. A sharp breath, followed by what analysts described as a low mechanical resonance, identical to subaquatic frequency interference. The last words were barely audible. "It's coming from the lake." The signal died completely after that. No one could trace its origin. It appeared to bounce off multiple ridges simultaneously, impossible to pinpoint. Technicians later recreated the recording for documentation. The sound, that droning hum beneath Matthew's words, was unlike any natural phenomenon. In 2020, nearly a year later, 2 hikers trespassing in the restricted section captured drone footage that reignited public interest. The video, uploaded anonymously, showed a circular clearing near the area Matthew vanished. Perfectly symmetrical, with all vegetation inside unnaturally dry. At the center of the clearing, a dark discoloration in the soil, shaped vaguely like a human outline. When park officials reviewed the footage, they requested its removal from the internet within hours. The hikers were fined and questioned, but refused to share the original file, claiming someone from the Park Service had already visited their home to retrieve the SD card. The circular patch was later surveyed via satellite imaging, but subsequent photos showed nothing. The clearing was gone, overtaken by growth in less than 6 weeks. Botanists called the regrowth rate impossible. Unofficially, rangers began referring to the site as the Silent Clearing. A retired ranger named Dean Holloway came forward privately in 2021. He claimed to have known Matthew for years and participated in an earlier unrecorded search before the official one began. Dean described finding boot prints along the rim, large, matching Matthew's, but spaced unnaturally far apart, as though he'd been running or leaping. At one point, Dean swore he saw movement across the still surface of Crater Lake, like someone walking just below the waterline. He radioed the team, but static drowned his message. Minutes later, his compass began to spin violently. "I don't talk about it much," he said in a private interview, "but I still hear that hum in my ears when I think about that day. It wasn't wind. It wasn't water. It was something alive." Dean passed away 2 years later from heart complications. His statement was never officially filed. In late October 2021, a seasonal maintenance crew working near the North Access Trail unearthed a GoPro camera lodged under a tree root, half buried in volcanic soil. The serial number confirmed it belonged to the Park Service, the same batch issued to Matthew's unit in 2019. When investigators recovered the SD card, only the final 3 minutes were playable. The rest was corrupted beyond repair. The footage began with Matthew's gloved hand adjusting the camera, his voice calm. North Ridge inspection, all clear, light drizzle, no wind, and then came the same humming tone heard in the radio recording. Deeper this time, vibrating through the mic. Matthew looked up, breathing hard. The frame shook violently, as if the ground itself were trembling. Seconds later, the camera tilted toward the lake. A tall, thin silhouette appeared in the distance, unmoving, standing at the water's edge. The footage flickered with static, the hum intensifying before abruptly cutting off. The final still frame, when analyzed, revealed faint reflections of two figures, one resembling Matthew, and another, much taller, behind him. The footage was classified and stored in park archives. It has never been released publicly. Weeks after the GoPro discovery, a confidential park memo was leaked online. It detailed an unrecorded field visit by two federal environmental agents to Crater Lake's north rim. The memo referenced an abnormal electromagnetic reading originating from beneath the lake's surface, fluctuating between 7 Hz and 12 Hz, frequencies known to induce anxiety and hallucination in humans. But the document's final page was redacted, save for one line left intact. The frequency stops when approached, as if aware of observation. Shortly after the leak, the file vanished from all major forums. The original poster's account was deleted. Local residents reported that, for several nights following the event, low vibrations could be felt along the lake's edge, subtle but rhythmic, like a faint heartbeat pulsing through the ground. Fishermen said it rattled their gear. The Park Service dismissed it as seismic activity. Yet the U.S. Geological Survey recorded no tremors in the region during that time. It was as though the lake itself was trying to mask something beneath. By early 2022, Crater Lake's north rim had become a forbidden zone, fenced, guarded, and marked as undergoing stabilization and ecological restoration. But on February 14th, a park drone conducting a thermal scan detected a sudden burst of heat rising from the lake's center, forming a perfect ring before fading within seconds. That same night, residents in nearby Fort Klamath reported a low-frequency sound rolling through the air, shaking windows and triggering car alarms. Rangers dispatched to the rim found nothing unusual, except that the temperature near the clearing dropped to freezing levels, while surrounding areas remained mild. One ranger, in an unverified recording later leaked to Reddit, whispered, "It's like the forest was breathing, and it just exhaled." When the drone footage was analyzed frame by frame, one image stood out, a pale figure emerging briefly from the mist over the water, arms extended, before disappearing entirely into the fog. Officials claimed it was lens flare, but those who saw the raw file said otherwise. Matthew Cole's body was never recovered. The official report listed his case as unresolved disappearance, presumed accidental. But to those who worked alongside him, the silence around his story speaks louder than any conclusion. Ranger Lisa Pennington transferred soon after, citing health-related stress. Before leaving, she told a local reporter off-record, "Whatever happened out there wasn't weather, wasn't wildlife. The lake took something, and it's still there." To this day, Crater Lake maintains a strange reputation among locals. Phones lose signal near the north rim, compasses spin without cause, and sometimes, on windless nights, residents claim to hear a deep, steady hum rolling through the trees. The official search files remain sealed. The park's archives list Matthew's GoPro footage under restricted classification code C47, accessible only by federal authorization. No one has since been allowed to hike that section again. As one ranger put it best, "Some trails stay closed for a reason." In late November 2014, a small team of forestry contractors was assigned to survey logging impact zones near Olympic National Forest, Washington. Among them was Carla Reynolds. a 29-year-old environmental scientist from Tacoma known for her methodical fieldwork and calm personality. The team's task was routine: map tree density, photograph erosion points, and report evidence of illegal logging operations. Their survey area covered an isolated section of the forest, roughly 15 miles east of Lake Quinault, a region notorious among rangers for poor visibility, shifting fog, and erratic compass readings. Locals rarely hiked there. Some even called it the forest that moves. Carla radioed her supervisor at 6:30 a.m., confirming her solo route into the western perimeter. Her check-in time was set for 5 p.m. She never made that call. By 8 p.m., when the crew regrouped, her coordinates still showed static. The GPS frozen on one spot, deep inside restricted woodland. The next morning, search teams followed the signal, only to find her handheld GPS lying on the forest floor, still flashing her last location: 47.453 degrees north, 123.834 degrees west. Rescue teams combed the area for 2 days before discovering a narrow, overgrown trail that wasn't listed on any modern maps. At the end of the path, they found something unexpected: a small wooden cabin, half collapsed, buried beneath moss and pine needles. It was invisible from the air and clearly hadn't been touched in decades. Inside, they discovered Carla's camera bag lying on the floor near a broken chair. Muddy prints, bare footprints, trailed across the cabin floor and out the back door into the trees. Her camera was missing. Investigators also found something unusual: a faded U.S. Forest Service property tag dated 1958, nailed into the wall. But there were no records of any government cabin built in that area. None. Ranger Mark Hollis noted in his report, "Cabin structure predates known surveys. Appears to have been deliberately hidden. No sign of habitation except the footprints." That cabin, according to official logs, did not exist. On the third day, Carla's Nikon DSLR was found lodged in the hollow of a fallen tree, roughly 100 meters from the cabin. It had been carefully wrapped in a jacket to protect it from rain. When retrieved, the camera still held power, and the SD card was intact. The photos began normally: survey shots, trees, soil samples, field notes. But around image number 278, things changed. The next series showed a cabin under low fog, taken from multiple angles. Then several blurred close-ups: a window, a doorknob, and something behind the glass, a face, pale and half hidden by shadow. The final photo was pitch black, but when lightened, faint outlines of hands pressed against wood were visible, as though someone had been pushing from the inside. Forensics found no fingerprints on the camera itself. Every photo after number 283 had a faint horizontal line distortion, a digital glitch consistent with magnetic interference, not water damage. Historical maps of Olympic National Forest from the 1950s revealed a curious entry: a temporary ranger outpost listed near Carla's coordinates, active only for one summer in 1959. The record abruptly ended that same year with the notation, "Site condemned, unsafe structure." Former Ranger Elliot Greaves, now 82, remembered it well. "We were told not to go near that cabin," he said in a 2015 interview. "They said it was unstable, but that wasn't the reason. The radios didn't work there. The air felt heavy, like the forest was listening." He recalled one ranger who went missing from that same region in 1959. The man's name was Thomas Greeley, last seen near the very coordinates of the hidden cabin. When investigators compared the footprints from the floor to archived evidence photos from 1959, the measurements were nearly identical: same size, same gate spacing. But Greeley would have been long dead, During a secondary excavation, searchers discovered a metal box buried near the cabin's foundation. Inside was a weathered notebook, later identified as belonging to the missing ranger, Thomas Greeley. The first pages were mundane. Patrol notes, wildlife counts, maintenance entries. But the last few entries shifted in tone. Something walks between the trees at dusk. Doesn't make sound. Doesn't cast a shadow. Heard tapping on the cabin wall again last night. 3 knocks, always in threes. The forest feels awake. The pines, they whisper names. The final page was smeared with dirt and rain. Only 3 words were legible. Don't open door. That note was dated August 17th, 1959. The night Greeley vanished. The journal was sealed as evidence. Within a week, the cabin area was declared a restricted preservation site. No public explanation followed. In 2016, 2 years after Carla's disappearance, a maintenance worker inspecting the restricted zone discovered a rusted handheld reel-to-reel recorder beneath fallen boards inside the cabin. It still contained a tape labeled Field 9, August 1959. When the tape was restored, experts heard faint voices. 2 men speaking about the sound coming from the woods. Static grew louder, then a low wooden knocking rhythm echoed in the background. 3 slow knocks, pause, then 3 more. The men's voices became panicked. One said, "It's circling the cabin." Lights outside, moving too fast to be lanterns. Then the knocking stopped. The last sound was a heavy door creaking open, followed by absolute silence. Sound analysis confirmed the audio was authentic, but background readings suggested infrasound vibrations, similar to those caused by seismic shifts or something resonating below 20 hertz, too low for human hearing. In 2018, hikers trespassing near the restricted area reported seeing a light deep within the forest. A steady yellow glow resembling a lantern. When rangers investigated the claim, they found fresh footprints leading toward the cabin site. They were barefoot, size 11, same pattern as before. Thermal drones captured faint heat signatures inside the perimeter that night, human-shaped, stationary, but vanishing when approached. At dawn, the team discovered something that sent chills through the crew. The cabin door had been reattached, though it had been removed years earlier. Fresh wood splinters and a single handprint were found pressed into the outer wall, deep enough to dent the grain. DNA analysis returned no match. The print didn't belong to Carla or any known ranger. Weeks later, a storm triggered a small landslide near the cabin site, partially exposing a second foundation buried underneath, older than the visible cabin above. Inside, archaeologists found fragments of wooden furniture fused with bone-like material and 3 rusted lanterns, still arranged upright. Each lantern's glass was coated black from the inside. When they excavated deeper, they uncovered something else. A wooden doorframe leading nowhere, surrounded by roots that appeared to have grown through it, as if the forest had tried to reclaim or seal it. The air around the site measured unusually high electromagnetic fluctuations. Cameras malfunctioned, radios filled with static and faint knocking sounds that mimicked the old recordings. By sunset, the team retreated. The next morning, the entire excavation pit had collapsed in on itself, leaving no trace of the door or the remains below. The following year, the area was quietly reclassified as a sensitive ecological zone. All access was permanently prohibited. Even rangers were instructed to stay clear. Unofficially, former staff say the cabin area still emits faint, low-frequency vibrations at night. Wildlife avoids it completely. Drone flights over the coordinates show distorted imagery, blurred pixels, even on modern satellite feeds. Carla Reynolds' disappearance remains unsolved. Her family received her belongings, camera, backpack, and a logbook. In the final entry, written just before her last transmission, she wrote, "Found a structure not listed on any map. Looks abandoned. We'll check inside." Strange quiet here. Even the rain sounds different. No further entries followed. Today, hikers along the Olympic boundary sometimes report hearing slow, rhythmic knocks echoing through the forest during heavy fog. The Park Service attributes it to woodpeckers. Locals aren't convinced. A nearby ranger station keeps Carla's recovered camera in a locked cabinet, still loaded with that final photo, the one showing hands on the inside of the cabin door. Each year, on November 14th, its battery light flickers on by itself, even though it's never been recharged. As one retired ranger put it, "The forest doesn't forget. It keeps what enters its silence." To this day, the location of the cabin beneath the pines is withheld from public maps. Only a few who've been there describe the same feeling: pressure in the ears, dizziness, and that unmistakable rhythm of 3 slow knocks somewhere in the distance. In late August 2017, a group of 4 college friends from Portland, Jason Miller, 22, Sarah Thompson, 21, Alex Rivera, 23, and Megan Lee, 22, set out to explore the backcountry trails of Mount St. Helens National Volcanic Monument. Their goal was simple: a weekend camping trip near Lewitt Falls, a secluded area notorious among hikers for dense fog, steep volcanic cliffs, and sudden thunderstorms. Jason, an experienced hiker, had prepared meticulously: backpacks loaded with emergency gear, GPS devices, walkie-talkies, and satellite trackers. The group planned to hike in on Friday afternoon, set up camp, and return Sunday evening. Witnesses later reported seeing them at the visitor center at 1:15 p.m. on Friday. They were in good spirits, laughing and taking photos, unaware that the forest they were entering had a history of mysterious disappearances. At least 3 hikers had vanished from the same region over the previous 5 years. Their last known location, according to GPS ping logs, was roughly 2.5 miles into the dense pine basin, an area with volcanic debris, fallen trees, and shifting terrain that makes it easy to get lost, even for the most seasoned hikers. By nightfall, none of the friends had checked in. When their families attempted to contact them, all devices showed no signal. Not unusual for the area, but the duration of silence alarmed officials. By Saturday morning, the park rangers initiated a search and rescue operation. Initial efforts were hampered by steep volcanic slopes and dense fog. A team of 7 rangers and 2 K9 units scoured the marked trails, focusing on Lewitt Falls and surrounding canyons. At 10:47 a.m., the K9 units reacted strongly to a faint scent trail near a cluster of fallen firs. The handlers noted the dogs became unusually agitated, refusing to continue beyond a certain point. Ranger Emily Cross later described the area as unnaturally still. Even the birds had vanished. By noon, the team found Jason's camera lodged between 2 large boulders near the trail's edge. It was intact, but the memory card had been removed. No other belongings were visible. Satellite tracking pings showed the friends had moved off the main trail at 3:18 p.m., heading toward a narrow ravine. The GPS signals abruptly stopped around 3:57 p.m., as if they had vanished mid-hike. The rangers noted something troubling. The forest in that ravine was silent. No wind, no birds. And yet a faint thrum-like vibration could be felt in the soil. On the second day, a volunteer drone operator captured infrared footage of a small clearing in the ravine. The image revealed a faint heat signature that appeared human-shaped, standing motionless between volcanic boulders. When rangers investigated, the clearing was empty. No footprints, no disturbed soil, no signs of camping. Nothing to indicate anyone had been there. It was as though the figures seen on thermal imagery had never existed. However, they discovered 4 sets of clothing, jackets, hiking boots, and backpacks, arranged in a perfect line, facing the ravine. No one could explain why the items had been left there or how the hikers could have disappeared without leaving tracks. The situation took a chilling turn when a ranger found Sarah's notebook nearby. Inside, she had sketched the trail and annotated, "The fog moves like it's alive. Keeps shapes in the corner of my eye. Something watching." The handwriting ended abruptly halfway through the page. By the 3rd day, rangers noted strange electronic interference in the area. Radios and GPS devices failed intermittently, displaying static or inaccurate coordinates. At 2:33 p.m., Ranger Tom Erickson radioed in to report a faint, echoed scream, distant yet clear, coming from the ravine. When rangers reached the source, the canyon was empty. No wildlife, no human presence. 2 rangers reported feeling sudden chills and nausea, describing it as like the forest itself was breathing around us. Despite using thermal cameras, the team could detect nothing unusual except occasional heat blips appearing and disappearing, resembling human silhouettes. The drone footage captured later revealed something alarming: faint movement of shadows across dense fog. Not cast by the trees, but following erratic patterns, as if something was walking unseen between them. Searchers began to note an odd pattern. The fog thickened only near where the hikers had last been, then dissipated elsewhere. Multiple rangers described the phenomenon as unnatural and oppressive. On day 4, the team discovered Alex's backpack, wedged between 2 fallen trees. Inside were several items: water bottles, snacks, a partially used first aid kit, and a handwritten map marked with the location of a cave-like depression not noted on official maps. The handwriting indicated awareness of being followed or watched. "Stay on edge. Noises behind me, but I can't see it. The air is heavy nearby." Megan's boots were found, upright in mud, facing the opposite direction of the trail. Investigators noted that the spacing suggested walking or movement in unusually large strides. Impossible for a person her height. Environmental analysis revealed that the soil under the footprints had been compacted unevenly, as though the hikers had been lifted or carried. The findings were documented, photographed, and then sealed. Park officials later refused to comment on what appeared to be disturbances inconsistent with natural events. Later, a separate team retrieved a handheld voice recorder from the ravine floor. The recording captured faint, unintelligible whispering, punctuated by breathing, footsteps, and occasional high-pitched metallic tapping. Analysts claimed it sounded like human voices, but pitch and cadence didn't match any of the hikers. At one point, a faint scream was recorded, followed by a low hum resonating beneath the forest floor. Audio engineers could detect subtle infrasound waves, similar to frequencies known to induce disorientation and fear. Attempts to play back the recording on site triggered compass errors and malfunctioning GPS signals. Equipment would only function properly after leaving the ravine. Off the record, one ranger said, "It felt like the forest was reacting to the sound, like it knew we were listening." The audio was archived as part of the official search documentation, but remains classified. By the 5th day, the search party had grown to 12 rangers, 4 K9 units, and 2 volunteer geologists. The fog in the ravine was nearly continuous, obscuring visibility to less than 10 feet. At 3:16 p.m., a thermal drone captured a rapid series of heat signatures, moving erratically across the rocky slopes. The shapes seemed humanoid but elongated, shifting unnaturally. Rangers deployed 2 K9 units, but the dogs refused to approach and began whining violently, retreating back toward the base camp. Then the strangest phenomenon occurred. All electronic devices began malfunctioning simultaneously. Radios emitted high-pitched feedback, GPS units spun wildly, and drone cameras flickered to static. In that instant, witnesses reported hearing whispered voices calling the hikers' names, echoing off the volcanic cliffs. Rangers ran toward the sound, only to find a perfectly circular clearing with no footprints, no disturbed earth, and 4 sets of clothing laid out as if staged. The ground was damp, but nothing suggested recent human activity. The team attempted to leave immediately, but compasses spun uncontrollably. After 17 minutes, the anomaly dissipated, the devices stabilized, and the fog lifted slightly. By then, the campers' remains were nowhere to be found. The official report concluded, no evidence of human presence, disappearance unresolved. Yet every ranger present later claimed the forest felt alive, as if the trees themselves had watched the events unfold. In interviews conducted months later, volunteer geologist David Larkin revealed off-record observations. I swear I saw figures standing just beyond the fog. I could see them perfectly. But every time I blinked or lifted the binoculars, they vanished. And the forest, it smelled metallic, like iron in the air. Local residents near the monument reported unusual phenomena in subsequent weeks. Hikers hearing names called out despite being alone. Strange rhythmic thumping underfoot, as though something heavy walked unseen. Wildlife avoiding certain patches of forest entirely, including foxes, deer, and birds. Ranger Hollis admitted he kept a personal log documenting the events. In it, he noted, the ravine appears to function differently. Time and space feel warped. Those who enter sometimes don't return or return changed. I don't know what does this, but it's not natural. Investigators were left with an unsettling question. Did the forest itself displace the campers? Or was there something else lurking unseen among the trees? By 2018, Mount St. Helens's backcountry authorities quietly installed no-entry restrictions around the dense pine basin. The area was declared hazardous due to unstable terrain, though search logs hinted at more disturbing reasons. The campers' families were given belongings recovered during the search: backpacks, notebooks, and a partially recovered GPS tracker. Forensic analysis of the device confirmed their movements ended abruptly at the ravine center, with no evidence of a fall, struggle, or human interference. One ranger who participated in the search, speaking on the condition of anonymity, said, "I've been in the forest my whole life. But this isn't something I can explain. There's something out there. It watches, and it moves things. It's alive in ways we don't understand." Psychological evaluations of volunteers revealed long-lasting trauma. Some reported nightmares featuring shadowy figures and unseen voices, while others refused to ever return to the area. Drone surveys continue to show sporadic heat anomalies within the ravine, even during winter, suggesting the forest retains unknown energy or entities. Today, dense pine basin remains one of the most enigmatic regions of Mount St. Helens National Volcanic Monument. Officially, it's a hazardous terrain zone. Unofficially, locals call it the Whispering Ravine. Search records, thermal footage, and recovered items suggest the forest itself plays a role in disappearances, or at least shelters something capable of manipulating space and perception. Every year, hikers report the same phenomena: unseen footsteps, whispers of names, fog that moves strangely, and gear mysteriously rearranged. Despite decades of investigation, there is no rational explanation. The vanishing of Jason, Sarah, Alex, and Megan remains unresolved. Their story stands as a stark reminder. In the Pacific Northwest, some forests hold secrets no human should uncover. As a ranger once warned in private, respect the forest. Not because it's dangerous, but because it remembers. And it doesn't forget. In early October 2018, Nathan Clark, a 34-year-old wildlife photographer from Seattle, embarked on a solo expedition into the Hoh Rainforest in Olympic National Park. Known for its dense, moss-draped canopy, cascading waterfalls, and near-constant mist. The forest stretches across over 24,000 acres and is notorious among hikers for sudden disorientation and loss of signal. Nathan planned to photograph rare species of owls and salamanders. He filed a detailed itinerary with the park rangers, expecting to be out for 3 days. His plan included camping near the Big Spruce Trail, a secluded area often avoided by casual visitors due to treacherous moss-covered terrain and sudden fog banks. By 7:30 a.m., Nathan had checked in via satellite communicator, reporting that visibility was low, but the forest was alive and silent in a beautiful way. This would be the last confirmed message from him. That afternoon, a local hiker reported seeing a figure moving along the mossy trail. A man, alone, carrying camera gear, but then suddenly disappearing behind dense ferns, never to be seen again. The hiker noted a faint humming in the air, though there was no wind. When rangers reached the location the next morning, Nathan's campsite was intact, gear untouched, but no trace of Nathan himself could be found. Only the sound of dripping water and distant bird calls filled the forest. Park rangers arrived with K9 units and began a systematic search of the Big Spruce Trail. Initially, the trail appeared ordinary: fallen logs, moss-laden rocks, and shallow streams. But after roughly half a mile, they found a cluster of unusual depressions in the soil, perfectly circular, as if something heavy had pressed into the ground repeatedly. Rangers also reported subtle auditory anomalies: faint whispers, footsteps that didn't match ranger positions, and the occasional low-frequency thrum vibrating through the earth. The K9 units, usually reliable in tracking humans, reacted erratically. Some refused to advance, others circled in place, growling at empty air. Near a small creek, investigators discovered Nathan's tripod, standing upright with no camera attached. The legs were partially sunk into mud, suggesting it had been placed deliberately, yet no footprints led away from it. Environmental experts noted that moss growth in the area appeared older than the surrounding patches, as if time or growth was distorted. Measurements showed unusual readings in magnetic and electromagnetic fields, making GPS and compass readings unreliable. By nightfall, the rangers pulled back due to dense fog and worsening weather, leaving more questions than answers about Nathan's disappearance. On the 3rd day, a volunteer discovered a small notebook near the creek, where Nathan's tripod had been found. Pages were damp but legible. The entries reflected his scientific observations at first: photographs, species notes, and humidity readings. Around page 17, the tone shifted. Nathan described the sounds that shouldn't exist. I hear footsteps echoing in every direction. Every time I turn, nothing is there. Even the owls are silent, like they are holding their breath. The last entry was hastily scribbled. I think I'm being followed. The hum, it pulses with my heartbeat. I'm going to check the old log shelter. Maybe I can see something. No further entries existed. Rangers examined the notebook carefully. No fingerprints other than Nathan's could be found. Soil analysis around the notebook suggested recent disturbance, yet no tracks led away from the area. Additionally, environmental sensors placed by the team noted an abrupt drop in temperature around the notebook site, several degrees lower than surrounding areas. This anomaly lasted for exactly 22 minutes before normalizing. Later that day, drone footage captured a pale silhouette moving along the Big Spruce Trail. Initially believed to be Nathan, playback revealed the figure moving unnaturally fast, almost gliding over roots and rocks. When rangers attempted to investigate on foot, GPS devices malfunctioned, displaying coordinates that shifted repeatedly, suggesting either interference or an unknown environmental anomaly. Several search team members reported hearing their names whispered, though no other humans were in sight. Some described a sensation of being watched, with shadows moving in the fog despite no visible source. Infrasound measurements indicated frequencies between 7 to 9 hertz, known to induce anxiety, dizziness, and hallucinations. One ranger later admitted, "I felt like I was running in place, but nothing was moving. It was disorienting, almost like the forest was holding me." As night fell, a small thermal anomaly appeared on drone footage. A cluster of heat signatures standing perfectly still, then dispersing abruptly. The team could find no trace on the ground. On the fourth day, the search team discovered an abandoned log shelter, partially concealed by thick ferns and moss. This structure was not marked on any park maps, nor listed in historical records. Inside, investigators found several footprints, some resembling human size but elongated in stride, others impossible to classify. Deep scratches marred the walls, and faint dark stains were visible in corners. The shelter contained a discarded camera lens and a pair of gloves matching Nathan's description, but no personal identification. Soil and moss samples indicated recent human disturbance, yet the items appeared carefully placed, almost deliberately staged. Rangers noted that the shelter seemed to radiate a strange cold, significantly lower than outside temperatures, accompanied by a low humming vibration through the floor. Attempts to take thermal readings inside the shelter failed. Devices oscillated wildly. Officers took the shelter as a warning. They reported a pervasive feeling of dread, describing the structure as watching us, waiting. On the fifth day, rangers recovered a handheld GoPro from beneath a thick mat of moss, positioned along a stream near the log shelter. The footage revealed Nathan setting up his camera around noon, capturing the forest's misty canopy and the gentle drip of rainwater. About 20 minutes in, the footage captured something unusual. Faint, shadowy shapes moving between the trees, almost imperceptible at first. Then, a strange hum resonated, vibrating through the camera microphone. Nathan appears in the frame, scanning the forest nervously, murmuring his own name, as if questioning whether he was imagining the phenomenon. The camera abruptly stops recording after a loud crack, followed by the sound of something heavy moving behind him. The last frame shows Nathan turning sharply toward the lens, his expression frozen in terror, before the camera falls into the mud. Analysis of the GoPro revealed no evidence of tampering. Yet forensic experts confirmed the soundscape recorded was consistent with a physical presence that could not be identified. Drone footage synchronized with the GoPro shows fleeting heat anomalies in the same spots Nathan panicked at. Yet no footprints or ground disturbances were detected. Rangers documented everything meticulously, but the forest seemed to react to every investigation. Fog thickening, shadows shifting, and electronic equipment failing intermittently. By day 6, the team noticed unexplained environmental changes. Fog that rolled in patches only where searchers moved, sudden temperature drops, and subtle vibrations beneath the forest floor. At approximately 1:17 p.m., a ranger reported seeing a figure standing motionless in a clearing roughly 150 meters away. Thermal cameras captured it as human-shaped but slightly taller and distorted, with movement that defied natural gait patterns. When the ranger aimed a flashlight, the figure vanished into dense fog as if it had never existed. Another volunteer described a whistling sound that matched the tonal pitch of Nathan's humming on his last GoPro footage. Compasses spun uncontrollably, GPS devices failed, and radios emitted static when attempting communication. The search team began experiencing heightened fear and nausea, consistent with infrasound exposure. One ranger noted, "I couldn't walk straight, felt like my legs had their own mind." The forest, it was playing with us. By evening, the forest grew eerily silent. No birds, no wind, no rustling leaves. The only sound was a soft, rhythmic thumping, like footsteps moving just out of sight, accompanied by faint whispers echoing through the trees. On the seventh day, the team located a small ravine with steep moss-covered slopes, where previous anomalies had been recorded. Multiple K9 units refused to enter, barking and whining at the unseen presence. While examining the area, a searcher noted a single camera tripod set up on a rock with no equipment attached. As he stepped closer, a loud snap echoed, followed by a gust of cold wind sweeping the ravine. The temperature dropped at least 10 degrees within seconds. When the team looked back, one of the volunteers, Mark Jensen, had vanished. There was no trace of him, no footprints, no sounds, nothing to indicate where he went. Thermal imaging showed a faint heat signature near the slope for 3 seconds. Then nothing. Rangers immediately called for extraction. Attempts to revisit the site revealed the forest had seemingly shifted. Trees appeared closer together, paths obscured, and familiar landmarks were unrecognizable. The Hoh Rainforest authorities later restricted access to the area. The disappearance of Mark, combined with Nathan's case, suggested an active anomaly within the forest, capable of displacing humans while leaving minimal evidence. Investigators compiled drone footage, GoPro recordings, and ranger logs. Anomalies included disappearing heat signatures, intermittent magnetic disturbances, and untraceable footsteps. Officially, authorities concluded the incidents were missing persons in challenging terrain. Unofficially, the rangers reported patterns too consistent to be random. All disappearances occurred near unmapped clearings, log shelters, or ravines, locations where fog and temperature anomalies were most pronounced. Forensic teams could find no evidence of foul play, but environmental scientists confirmed localized electromagnetic fields were capable of disrupting navigation and disorientation. One ranger said, "Whatever is out there, it's not a person, not an animal. It manipulates its environment. It waits. The Hoh Rainforest remains under surveillance, with a small team monitoring thermal and infrasound sensors." Sporadic anomalies continue to appear, maintaining the forest's reputation as a place where the line between reality and unknown is blurred. Years later, the Hoh Rainforest continues to inspire awe and fear. Locals and hikers whisper of the echoes, voices calling names in the mist, footprints appearing and vanishing, and shadowy figures glimpsed between ancient trees. Nathan's disappearance remains unsolved. Mark Jensen was never recovered, and the forest retains its secrets. Modern technology cannot fully penetrate its mysteries. The forest, alive with fog and moss, seems to react to human presence as if testing boundaries or observing intruders. Scientists warn visitors, respect the forest because it remembers and it watches. The Hoh rainforest, like the rest of the Pacific Northwest wilderness, reminds us that some forests are not merely wild. They are alive with forces we cannot explain. In June 2019, Ethan Foster, a 29-year-old avid hiker from Tacoma, set out to summit Mount Rainier via the Sunrise Trail, a less traveled route known for its steep volcanic scree, dense alpine forests, and unpredictable weather. Ethan had a reputation for careful planning, often hiking solo with GPS, emergency beacons, and satellite communications. Mount Rainier, standing at 14,411 feet, is notorious not only for its beauty, but also for sudden storms, deep fog, and treacherous snowfields. Historical records show numerous disappearances over decades, many of which remain unresolved. Ethan's itinerary was filed with park rangers. He planned to leave Sunrise Visitor Center at 6:45 a.m., camp near Sourdough Gap, and return by Sunday afternoon. Witnesses last saw him taking photographs near Crystal Creek at approximately 9:20 a.m. By late afternoon, Ethan failed to check in. His satellite communicator logged his last signal at 12:42 p.m., located roughly 1.8 miles off trail in a dense forest patch near a steep ravine. The area, known locally as Whispering Pines, is infamous for sudden fog banks that can reduce visibility to mere feet. Park rangers immediately launched a search and rescue operation, but the terrain proved challenging. Loose volcanic rock, dense underbrush, and intermittent fog made tracking nearly impossible. By the next morning, a team of 8 rangers and 2 K9 units scoured the Sunrise Trail. Initially, the forest appeared untouched, save for Ethan's footprints leading toward a narrow ravine. But the prints abruptly stopped at a moss-covered cliff edge, with no evidence of sliding or falling. Rangers noticed subtle anomalies. The air felt unnaturally heavy, birds were silent, and small branches appeared to have been snapped deliberately, not naturally. The K9 units became agitated, barking and retreating without reason. Around 11:05 a.m., a ranger discovered Ethan's hiking pack wedged between boulders. Inside were essentials: water, a first aid kit, and a notebook. The notebook detailed observations about the trail, wildlife, and weather. However, the last pages contained hastily scrawled warnings. The fog, it moves strangely. Shapes appear at the edge of vision and vanish. Thermal scans in the ravine revealed faint heat signatures that appeared and disappeared sporadically. Rangers attempted to triangulate the readings, but noted GPS interference, making accurate location tracking impossible. During afternoon searches, rangers found small items arranged unnaturally. A pair of gloves balanced on a rock, a water bottle standing upright on a narrow ledge, and Ethan's camera lens facing directly at the ravine. Audio analysis of Ethan's last SATCOM check-ins revealed faint whispers in the background, though no one else was near the forest at the time. The whispers seemed repeated and patterned, almost as if someone, or something, was mimicking Ethan's voice. The forest itself appeared to react. Fog thickened as searchers approached, and branches swayed despite calm wind conditions. One ranger noted, "It's as if the forest itself is aware of our presence, guiding us away from something." By nightfall, drones with infrared cameras captured anomalous silhouettes in areas where searchers had already scoured multiple times. These silhouettes shifted positions between frames, despite no human or animal presence. Rangers reported unease, with several claiming a sensation of being watched, and some experienced lightheadedness and disorientation, consistent with environmental infrasound exposure. By the third day, search teams observed unexplained phenomena. GPS trackers repeatedly jumped coordinates by hundreds of meters. Radios emitted static and intermittent human-like voices, and compasses spun uncontrollably. Ranger Emily Cruz described, "I could hear footsteps following me, but whenever I turned, nothing was there. It was like the forest itself was moving around me." Thermal drones detected moving heat anomalies in dense fog patches consistent with human shape, but repeated physical searches revealed no tracks. Items belonging to Ethan, including gloves and notebooks, were found in locations inconsistent with wind or gravity, suggesting deliberate placement. At 2:41 p.m., the forest around Crystal Creek fell into an eerie silence. Birds stopped singing, leaves ceased rustling, and even wind seemed absent. The rangers reported sudden dizziness and nausea, forcing a temporary retreat. Local mountaineers later mentioned seeing faint figures gliding between trees, which disappeared if observed directly. Some claim the fog seems to anticipate movement, thickening where humans are present. On the fourth day, rangers discovered a small, overgrown cabin, tucked deep within the alpine forest, well off Ethan's planned trail. The structure appeared abandoned for decades, moss growing over the roof, windows cracked and weathered. Inside, they found remnants of previous hikers, rusted cans, old clothing, and a collapsed cot, yet nothing matching Ethan's modern gear. Curiously, a new set of footprints led into the cabin and abruptly ended near the far wall. The footprints were human in shape, but stretched unnaturally long, almost as if the person, or thing, had elongated limbs. Ethan's camera was recovered, wedged in a corner. Reviewing the footage, rangers noted strange blurs between trees outside, with fleeting shadows that didn't correspond to the movements of the rangers themselves. One frame showed a figure peering through a broken window, partially obscured by mist, before vanishing entirely. The temperature inside the cabin was notably lower than outside, even for a shadowed structure at high elevation. Compass and GPS readings continued to fluctuate wildly, making mapping the interior nearly impossible. Rangers reported a sense of oppression and unease, describing the cabin as if it were actively resisting their presence. By dusk, the team exited, leaving markers for the next day. Even in retreat, some members claimed whispers followed them, soft yet distinct, echoing Ethan's voice. The following morning, rangers discovered Ethan's notebook atop the collapsed cot. Pages described the hike in detail, but the final entries grew increasingly erratic and fearful. I can hear them whispering. Footsteps mirror my own. Shapes. They glide between the trees, vanishing when I look. The last page contained a hastily sketched map of the forest, with the cabin circled in red, accompanied by the words, "Do not trust the fog. It moves on its own." Additionally, a small digital recorder, partially water-damaged, was recovered. Playbacks revealed low-frequency hums and faint whispering, alternating between Ethan's voice and an unknown echo, mimicking his tone. Analysis confirmed the sounds were not digitally altered, leaving investigators with an unnerving conclusion. Some presence in the forest was capable of replicating human vocal patterns. Rangers noted another anomaly. Soil near the cabin was warmer than surrounding ground, despite frost patches outside. This suggested a localized energy source or environmental disturbance, consistent with previous reports of electromagnetic anomalies in Mount Rainier's alpine forests. On day 6, a final search team attempted to follow Ethan's last known path near Crystal Creek Ravine. Dense fog had settled again, visibility under 10 feet. GPS and compasses failed immediately. Thermal drones recorded a faint figure moving erratically, appearing to pass through trees without disturbing branches or foliage. A sudden gust carried the sound of footsteps and whispered voices, calling Ethan's name, echoing from multiple directions. Rangers reported an overwhelming sense of vertigo, unable to maintain footing on even gentle slopes. When rangers reached the apparent location of the figure, they found only broken branches, disturbed moss, and Ethan's camera lens lying face down. The last thermal overlay showed a small, shifting heat signature, then nothing. All attempts to retrace the path led to confusion. The forest seemed to shift and reorganize itself, making familiar landmarks unrecognizable. Search teams were forced to retreat for safety, leaving the forest as it was, foggy, silent, and impenetrable. On day 6, a final search team attempted to follow Ethan's last known path near Crystal Creek Ravine. Dense fog had settled again, visibility under 10 feet. GPS and compasses failed immediately. Thermal drones recorded a faint figure moving erratically, appearing to pass through trees without disturbing branches or foliage. A sudden gust carried the sound of footsteps and whispered voices, calling Ethan's name, echoing from multiple directions. Rangers reported an overwhelming sense of vertigo, unable to maintain footing on even gentle slopes. When rangers reached the apparent location of the figure, they found only broken branches, disturbed moss, and Ethan's camera lens lying face down. The last thermal overlay showed a small, shifting heat signature, then nothing. All attempts to retrace the path led to confusion. The forest seemed to shift and reorganize itself, making familiar landmarks unrecognizable. Search teams were forced to retreat for safety, leaving the forest as it was, foggy, silent, and impenetrable. Investigators concluded that Ethan's disappearance, along with similar cases, points to a pattern of environmental manipulation. Thermal anomalies, mimicked voices, and disorientation suggest a localized natural or unknown phenomenon, capable of influencing perception and human behavior. Experts remain divided. Some attribute incidents to topographical anomalies, infrasound, and hypothermia, while others believe the region exhibits unexplained, possibly anomalous activity, concentrated in remote forested ravines. Official reports list Ethan Foster as missing, presumed lost, but his case, like many in the Pacific Northwest forests, remains open and unresolved. Researchers continue to monitor Mount Rainier's backcountry, documenting occurrences that challenge conventional understanding of wilderness survival. Mount Rainier's wilderness continues to inspire both awe and fear. Ethan Foster's disappearance remains a chilling reminder that some forests are more than landscapes. They are living, unknowable entities. The Pacific Northwest, with its dense fog, moss-covered trees, and hidden ravines, seems to retain memory, echoing the presence of those who enter and never return. While technology and rangers can document anomalies, they cannot explain them. Local lore now speaks of the watching forest, a place where the fog moves, shadows shift, and voices echo, reminding every visitor. The wilderness is not merely wild. It is aware. As one ranger privately warned, some who vanish are gone forever, but the forest never forgets. And it watches those who dare enter. The night may be over, dark fears family. But remember, every story you just heard came from a place where truth bleeds into terror. 10 stories, 10 lives changed forever by what hides in the dark. The lost, the haunted, the hunted. Some escaped. Some vanished into the unknown. These are not just tales. They are warnings. Because the shadows you fear aren't just imagination. They're memories of something real. So tonight, as you turn off the lights, remember this. The darkness outside your window. It's listening, waiting, watching. Until next time, stay safe. Stay curious, and never forget, darkness always remembers its visitors. This is Dark Fears, signing off.